What raise? Karen's voice cut through the conference room like a scalpel through flesh, her smile sharp enough to perform surgery. I gave it to Jake. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the solar plexus. I sat there in that glass-walled meeting room, watching my wife, my boss, my supposed life partner, deliver the news that would change everything. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry wasps, and I could feel the eyes of every colleague boring into me, waiting for my reaction. "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Karen Evans, all 39 years of calculated ambition, leaned back in her leather chair with the satisfaction of a cat who just cornered a particularly fat mouse. The promotion you've been expecting, Mark. The one you've been working toward for 3 years. I decided Jake was a better fit. Jake Turner, sitting 2 seats down from me, had the decency to look uncomfortable for about half a second before his trademark smirk took over. "Sorry, buddy. I guess I forgot to mention I'd applied for the same position." The conference room fell silent, except for the muffled sounds of traffic 12 floors below. Tina from HR shuffled through her papers with barely concealed glee. She'd never liked me, probably because I'd once made a joke about her collection of motivational cat posters. Now, she was practically purring. "This is a joke, right?" I looked around the room, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate prank. "I mean, my performance reviews have been stellar. I brought in the Morrison account, the tech startup deal, the—" "Mark." Karen's voice carried that tone I'd heard 1,000 times at home, the one that meant the conversation was over before it started. "Your work has been adequate. Jake's proposals showed more innovation." Innovation. The word tasted like battery acid in my mouth. Jake Turner, 35 years old, company golden boy, and apparently my wife's new favorite employee. He'd started at the firm 6 months ago, all charm and fresh ideas, quickly becoming Karen's right-hand man. I'd even welcomed him into our social circle, invited him to barbecues, shared beers and war stories from the marketing trenches. "I don't understand," I said, though I was beginning to understand all too well. "We discussed this position. You said I was the front runner." "Plans change." Karen's fingers drummed against the conference table, each tap like a nail being driven into a coffin. "Jake brings a fresh perspective. Sometimes you need new blood to shake things up." Tina cleared her throat, sliding a manila envelope across the polished surface toward me. "Mark, we've prepared a generous severance package, 3 months' salary, continuation of benefits, and a glowing reference letter." The envelope sat there like a dead fish. Severance package. The words echoed in my skull as the reality sank in. This wasn't just about the promotion. They were firing me. "You're kidding." I looked at Karen, searching her face for some flicker of the woman I'd married 8 years ago. "You're actually firing me?" "We're restructuring," Jake said, his voice oozing false sympathy. "It's nothing personal, Mark. Just business." Nothing personal. From the man who'd eaten at my dinner table, who'd watched football games in my living room, who'd listened to me complain about work stress and offered what I'd thought was genuine friendship. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like they were made of concrete. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the building itself was rejecting me. "This is unbelievable." "Mark, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be," Karen said, not even bothering to look at me directly. She was already shuffling through other papers, moving on to the next item on her agenda. "You'll land on your feet. You always do." The casual dismissal in her voice, the same voice that had whispered "I love you" just that morning, finally broke something inside me. I grabbed the envelope and walked toward the door, my face burning with humiliation. "Oh, and Mark?" Jake called out as I reached the threshold. I'll take good care of everything here. Don't worry about a thing. I turned back to see him winking at me, and for a moment, I seriously considered putting my fist through his perfectly capped teeth. Instead, I forced myself to nod and walk away. The open plan office beyond the conference room buzzed with activity, but I could feel the collective awareness of my situation rippling through the cubicles like a stone dropped in still water. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as I passed, then resumed in urgent whispers. By the time I reached my desk, everyone knew. My desk. 8 years of accumulated work life, family photos, a coffee mug from our honeymoon in Cabo, a stress ball shaped like a brain that Jake had given me as a gag gift last Christmas. I started shoving things into a cardboard box, my hands shaking with rage and humiliation. "Hey, Mark." Wes approached cautiously, his lanky frame hunched with awkwardness. Wesley Chen had been my closest friend at the company, a brilliant IT specialist who could make computers do things that bordered on magic. "I heard. I'm really sorry, man." "Yeah, well," I couldn't bring myself to look at him directly. "Apparently I'm not innovative enough for the new regime." Wes glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "Listen, there's something you should know." He palmed a USB drive and slipped it into my box, covering it with a manila folder. "Don't look at it here. Wait until you get home." Before I could ask what he meant, Karen appeared beside my desk. Up close, I could see the careful calculation behind her expression. Not quite cold enough to seem heartless to observers, but lacking any genuine warmth. "I know this is difficult," she said, loud enough for nearby co-workers to hear. "But I think you'll find the severance package is quite generous." Generous. I tested the word, finding it as hollow as everything else about this moment. "Right." She handed me a business card. "I've already spoken to a few contacts. There are opportunities out there for someone with your experience level." Experience level. Another knife twist, delivered with surgical precision. I was 41 years old, not exactly ancient, but in the marketing world, that apparently made me a dinosaur. I finished packing my box in silence, hyper-aware of every eye in the office tracking my movements. When I was done, I straightened up and looked at my wife, my ex-boss, one last time. "I guess I'll see you at home," I said. Something flickered across her face, too quick to interpret. "Actually, I'll be working late tonight. Big presentation tomorrow, you understand?" Of course she would be working late. With Jake, no doubt, celebrating their victory over the old guard. I nodded and picked up my box, walking toward the elevator with as much dignity as I could muster. The elevator ride down felt like descending into hell, each floor marking another level of my professional demise. By the time I reached the parking garage, my hands were cramping from gripping the box so tightly. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the concrete wall in front of me, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from my buddy Dave. "Heard about work. Want to grab a beer?" Word traveled fast in our circle. Dave, Tom, and I had been friends since college, a tight trio that had weathered marriages, divorces, career changes, and countless hangovers together. If anyone would understand what I was going through, it would be them. I typed back, "Rain check. Need to process this first." But even as I sent the message, I wondered if they'd still want to associate with someone who'd just been fired by his own wife. Success bred loyalty in our social circle. Failure was contagious. The drive home took me through the heart of our mid-sized city, past the usual landmarks of my daily routine. The coffee shop where I grabbed my morning latte, the dry cleaner where we took Karen's business suits, the park where we used to walk on Sunday mornings before work, consumed our entire lives. Our house sat in a development that screamed upper-middle-class success, manicured lawns, 2-car garages, and the kind of architectural uniformity that made every home look like a slightly different version of the same dream. I pulled into our driveway and sat there for another few minutes, staring at the front door. Inside, the house felt different somehow, as if the furniture itself knew about my changed circumstances. I set the box on the kitchen counter and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon, then sat at the breakfast bar where Karen and I had shared countless morning conversations about work, life, and plans for the future. Plans that apparently no longer included me. I pulled out Wes's USB drive, turning it over in my hands. Whatever was on there, he'd thought it was important enough to risk his own job by giving it to me. I walked to my home office, Karen's old room before she'd claimed the master bedroom's walk-in closet as her workspace, and fired up my laptop. The USB contained a single folder labeled FYI, with dozens of files inside, email threads, calendar entries, and what looked like internal company documents. I clicked on the first email and felt my blood turn to ice water. It was from Karen to Jake, dated 3 weeks ago. Mark's performance review is scheduled for Friday. After we discuss the promotion timeline, we should talk about transition planning. Transition planning. They'd been plotting this for weeks, maybe months. I scrolled through more emails, each one a dagger to whatever remained of my trust in the woman I'd married. Jake, your proposal for the Morrison account restructure is exactly what we need, much more innovative than Mark's approach. The board is asking about departmental efficiency. Having someone younger in the senior role would send the right message. We need to be strategic about this. Mark has institutional knowledge that could be valuable to competitors. And then, the one that made my hands shake with rage. Don't worry about Mark. He's gotten comfortable. Sometimes comfort breeds complacency, and complacency is a luxury we can't afford. Comfortable. Complacent. This from the woman who'd shared my bed for 8 years, who'd built her career alongside mine, who'd promised to love and cherish me through better or worse. I was deep into the email threads when I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I watched Karen walk up our front path, her phone pressed to her ear, laughing at something the caller was saying. She looked radiant, practically glowing with success. No, it went perfectly, she was saying as she came through the front door. He took it better than expected. Very professional. Professional. I minimized the laptop screen and walked to the kitchen where she was setting down her purse and keys with the casual confidence of someone who'd just solved a major problem. How are you holding up? She asked, her voice carrying just enough concern to sound genuine to anyone who didn't know her as well as I did. I've been better. I held up my bourbon glass. Want one? I shouldn't. Early day tomorrow. She opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of sparkling water, the expensive kind she'd developed a taste for after her last promotion. Mark, I know today was difficult, but I think this could be a good thing for you. A fresh start. A fresh start. I took a sip of bourbon, letting the burn ground me. Right. I'm serious. You've been stuck in the same role for years. This could be the push you need to really spread your wings. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was reframing my professional execution as career advice, turning betrayal into a favor she was doing for me. And Jake? I asked. How's he handling his big promotion? Something flickered in her eyes, but her smile never wavered. Jake's excited about the challenges ahead. He has some really innovative ideas for expanding the department. I bet he does. We stood there in our kitchen, 2 people who'd shared nearly a decade of marriage, looking at each other across a chasm that had opened up in the space of a single day. Or maybe it had been opening for years, and I'd just been too blind to see it. I'm going to take a bath, Karen said finally. Long day. She headed upstairs, leaving me alone with my bourbon and the USB drive that contained the evidence of her betrayal. I waited until I heard the bathroom door close, then returned to my laptop. There were more emails, more evidence of the systematic dismantling of my career. But it was the calendar entries that really caught my attention. Jake's schedule showed regular strategy sessions with Karen, often scheduled for times when I was out of the office at client meetings. and then I found something that made my blood run cold. Dinner meeting, Jake, discuss Mark's situation, chez Laurent, 7 p.m. The date was from last week. Chez Laurent was our anniversary restaurant, the place Karen and I had celebrated every major milestone in our relationship. She'd taken Jake there to discuss destroying my career. I sat back in my chair, the full scope of their betrayal finally sinking in. This wasn't just about a promotion or a job. This was about Karen systematically removing me from her life, both professional and personal. Jake wasn't just her new protégé. He was my replacement in every way that mattered. The house felt different now, like a stage set that had been designed to look like a home, but lacked any real warmth or authenticity. I finished my bourbon and poured another, then opened a new browser window. If Karen wanted to play games, I was more than willing to learn the rules. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. I spent the next 2 hours going through every file on Wes's USB drive, taking notes, building a timeline of Karen and Jake's conspiracy. By the time I was done, I had a clear picture of how they'd orchestrated my downfall, and more importantly, I had ideas about how to return the favor. The water had stopped running upstairs an hour ago, and I could hear Karen moving around in the bedroom, probably getting ready for another late night at the office tomorrow. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my home office, planning my next move. They thought I was comfortable, complacent, defeated. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I woke up alone the next morning, which wasn't unusual. Karen had always been an early riser, claiming she did her best thinking before the rest of the world woke up. What was unusual was the note she'd left on the coffee maker. Gone in early. Don't wait up tonight. K. Not love, Karen, or even XOXO. Just K, like I was a business associate she barely knew. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at our backyard where we'd hosted so many barbecues and dinner parties. Jake had been at most of them, charming everyone with his stories and quick wit. I remembered thinking how lucky we were to have such a good friend, someone who understood the pressures of our industry and could make Karen laugh after particularly stressful days. The irony tasted more bitter than the coffee. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave. Lunch today? Tom's buying. I hesitated before responding. Dave and Tom were good friends, but they were also part of the same professional circle as Karen and me. Word of my firing had probably spread through our entire social network by now. Still, I needed allies, and these guys had been my friends long before they'd known Karen. Sure. Noon at Murphy's? See you there. Murphy's Pub was our usual spot, a dark, wood-paneled place that served decent burgers and didn't judge you for drinking beer with lunch. I arrived first and claimed our regular booth in the back, ordering a pint while I waited. Dave showed up 10 minutes later, his expression carefully neutral. Dave Morrison was a successful real estate attorney, the kind of guy who could read people's motivations like a legal brief. He slid into the booth across from me and signaled the waitress for a beer. So, he said without preamble, want to tell me what really happened? You probably already know. Karen fired me, gave my promotion to Jake. Dave winced. Jesus, Mark, your own wife? Apparently I lack innovation. I took a long pull from my beer. Also, I'm too comfortable. That's corporate bullshit and you know it. You're one of the sharpest guys I know. Tom arrived as Dave was speaking, sliding into the booth beside him. Tom Bradley was an investment advisor, perpetually optimistic, and usually good for a laugh. Today, he looked like he was attending a funeral. This is fucked up, man, Tom said without bothering with pleasantries. I mean, seriously fucked up. Who fires their own husband? Someone who's been planning it for months, I said, then immediately regretted the bitterness in my voice. Dave and Tom exchanged glances. What do you mean? Dave asked. I considered telling them about Wes's USB drive, about the emails and calendar entries that painted a clear picture of Karen and Jake's conspiracy. But something held me back. These were my friends, but they were also part of a social circle where information was currency and secrets were weapons. Just a feeling, I said instead. This whole thing was too smooth, too well orchestrated. You don't just wake up one morning and decide to fire someone who's been with the company for 8 years. So what are you going to do? Tom asked. Find another job. Move on. What choice do I have? But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I had choices, and I was already making them. The question was how far I was willing to go. We ordered food and spent the next hour talking about everything except my situation. Sports, politics, Tom's latest dating disaster. Normal guy conversation that felt like a lifeline to my old life. But I could sense the undercurrent of awkwardness, the way they were both being careful not to mention Karen or work or anything that might remind me of my current circumstances. As we were finishing our burgers, Dave's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted slightly. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, just Karen's assistant, confirming a meeting for next week. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dave was still doing business with my wife's company, probably had been for years. Of course he was. Karen was successful, well-connected, and could throw a lot of legal work his way. My firing didn't change any of that. Don't worry about it, I said, forcing a smile. Business is business. But I could see the relief in his eyes, and I filed that reaction away for future reference. Loyalty was a luxury that successful people couldn't always afford. After lunch, I drove around aimlessly for a while, thinking about Dave's reaction and what it meant for my other relationships. How many of our mutual friends would quietly distance themselves from me to protect their connections with Karen? How many dinner invitations would dry up? How many golf games would happen without me? I found myself parked across the street from our office building, watching people come and go. At 2:30, I saw Jake emerge from the parking garage in his silver BMW, probably heading to a client meeting. He looked confident, successful, like a man who'd just gotten everything he wanted. On impulse, I started my car and followed him. Jake drove across town to the Riverside Hotel, one of the nicer places in the city. He parked and walked into the lobby like he owned the place. I waited 5 minutes, then followed him inside. The lobby was busy enough that I could blend in, pretending to read a newspaper while keeping an eye on Jake. He was sitting in the bar area, checking his phone, and occasionally glancing toward the elevator bank. At 3:15, Karen stepped out of the elevator. She looked stunning, wearing a navy blue dress I'd bought her for her birthday last year. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like a woman meeting her lover, not her business partner. They embraced, not a professional handshake, but a real hug that lasted several seconds too long. Then Jake led her to a corner table where they could talk privately. I couldn't hear their conversation from across the lobby, but their body language told the story. Karen was leaning forward, animated, her hand occasionally touching Jake's arm. He was listening intently, nodding, sometimes laughing at whatever she was saying. They looked like a couple. More than that, they looked happy. I sat there for an hour, watching my wife and my replacement plan whatever came next. When they finally got up to leave, Jake's hand rested briefly on the small of Karen's back, guiding her toward the elevator. They were going upstairs, together. I left the hotel feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. The betrayal was complete now, not just professional, but personal. Karen hadn't just stolen my job, she'd stolen my life and given it to someone else. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with rage and hurt, and a growing desire for revenge. They thought they were so clever, so careful. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. Back home, I opened my laptop and started researching. If Karen and Jake were having an affair, there would be evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, hotel reservations. I just had to know where to look. I started with social media, checking Jake's Instagram and Facebook accounts. He was careful. No pictures with Karen, no obvious signs of their relationship. But there were subtle clues. A photo of an expensive dinner with the caption, "Great Night," posted the same evening Karen had claimed to be working late. A picture of a hotel room view that looked suspiciously like the riverside. Then I found something interesting. A photo from 2 weeks ago showing Jake at a charity gala. I recognized the event. Karen had been invited but claimed she was too busy to attend. Yet there in the background of Jake's photo, barely visible but unmistakable, was Karen in her black cocktail dress. They'd been lying for weeks, maybe months. Every late night at the office, every business dinner, every conference that required overnight travel. How many of those had been cover stories for their affair? My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. It was Wes. "Hey man, how are you holding up?" "I've been better. Thanks for the USB drive, by the way. Very enlightening." "I figured you should know what you were up against. Listen, I'm calling because something weird happened today. Karen asked me to run a security audit on your old computer, make sure there were no personal files left behind. And I did what she asked, but I also made sure to image the hard drive first, just in case. You never know when that kind of thing might come in handy." Wes was being careful with his words, but I understood what he was offering. More evidence, more ammunition for whatever came next. "I appreciate that," I said. "Really. There's something else. Jake's been asking a lot of questions about network security, user access, that kind of thing, almost like he's worried about someone accessing information they shouldn't have." "Interesting." "Yeah, makes you wonder what he's so worried about, doesn't it?" After Wes hung up, I sat back and considered my options. I had evidence of Karen and Jake's professional conspiracy, strong suspicions about their personal relationship, and allies within the company who were willing to help me. The question was, what to do with all of it? I could confront Karen directly, demand an explanation, threaten to expose their affair, but that would only put them on guard and give them time to cover their tracks. I could go to HR, file a complaint about workplace misconduct. But Tina was clearly on Karen's side, and any official complaint would probably be buried or dismissed. Or I could play their game, but play it better than they did. I opened a new browser window and started researching private investigators. If Karen and Jake wanted to destroy my life, they were welcome to try. But they were about to learn that I wasn't going down without a fight. And when I fought back, I fought to win. The first PI I called was booked solid for the next month. The second one sounded like he'd learned his trade from watching too many movies. But the third one, a woman named Sarah Mitchell, sounded professional and experienced. "Marital infidelity cases are bread and butter," she said, when I explained what I needed. "How soon do you need results?" "As soon as possible. And I need everything documented, photographed, legally admissible." "That's going to cost you." "Money's not an object." It was a lie. Money was definitely going to be an object soon if I didn't find another job, but I'd worry about that later. Right now, I needed ammunition. "I can start tomorrow. Send me everything you have. Names, addresses, work schedules, vehicle descriptions. The more information I have, the faster I can work." After I hung up, I spent another hour compiling everything I knew about Karen and Jake's routines. Where they worked, where they lived, where they liked to eat and drink. I was building a case like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Karen came home at 11:30 that night, claiming she'd been in strategy meetings until after 10. She smelled like expensive perfume and wine, and there was a glow about her that I recognized from the early days of our relationship. "How was your day?" she asked, the question perfunctory. "Productive. Started putting out feelers for new opportunities." "That's great. I knew you'd bounce back quickly." She kissed my cheek, a brief, distracted peck, and headed upstairs. I waited until I heard the shower running, then checked her purse. Her credit card receipts told an interesting story. Dinner at Romano's, expensive, drinks at the Riverside Hotel bar, very expensive, and a charge for something called discretion sweets that made my blood boil. Discretion sweets. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. I photographed the receipts with my phone, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Karen came downstairs 20 minutes later in her silk pajamas, looking relaxed and satisfied. "I'm exhausted," she said, settling onto the couch next to me. "This transition at work is more complicated than I expected." "I bet it is." She gave me a sharp look, as if she'd heard something in my tone, but I kept my expression neutral. Let her wonder what I knew and when I'd figured it out. "Mark, I know this situation is difficult, but I hope you understand that I had to make the best decision for the company." "Of course, business is business." "Exactly." She seemed relieved that I was being so reasonable. Jake brings a fresh perspective that we really needed. Sometimes change is hard, but it's necessary. Jake certainly made an impression. He has. He's very dedicated. I'll bet he is, I thought. Out loud, I said, "Well, I'm sure you two will work well together." Something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or fear that I was getting too close to the truth, but she recovered quickly. "We make a good team," she said, "professionally speaking." "I'm sure you do." We sat there in our living room, two people who'd once loved each other, now playing a careful game of verbal chess. She was trying to gauge how much I knew. I was trying to keep her feeling secure while I gathered ammunition. "I think I'll head to bed," she said finally. "Early meeting tomorrow." "With Jake?" "Among others." She kissed my forehead this time, a gesture that felt more like a benediction than affection. "Things will get better, Mark. You'll see." After she went upstairs, I sat in the darkness of our living room, thinking about the woman I'd married and the stranger she'd become. Or maybe she'd always been this person, and I'd just been too blind to see it. Either way, she was about to learn that underestimating me was a serious mistake. I had evidence, allies, and a private investigator on the case. More importantly, I had motivation, the kind of burning desire for justice that could sustain a man through whatever came next. Karen and Jake had destroyed my life systematically, methodically, without a trace of remorse. Now it was my turn to return the favor, and I was just getting started. Sarah Mitchell looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a private investigator. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, and the kind of understated competence that came from years of watching people lie to themselves and each other. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far from anywhere Karen or Jake might randomly appear. "I've been doing this for 12 years, she said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Divorce cases, custody battles, insurance fraud. Your situation is pretty standard, unfortunately." "Standard? Workplace affair, spouse in position of power, systematic elimination of the inconvenient husband. I see it about once a month." The casual way she said it made my chest tighten. My personal catastrophe was just another Tuesday for her. "What do you need from me?" "Access to your joint accounts, credit card statements, phone bills if you can get them. And I need you to stay completely normal. Don't change your routine. Don't ask leading questions. Don't give them any reason to think you're suspicious." I can do that. Can you? Because the biggest mistake people make in these situations is getting impatient. They want immediate satisfaction, immediate confrontation. But good evidence gathering, takes time. I liked her already. She spent the next hour explaining her process: surveillance, background checks, financial investigation. It would take 2 weeks minimum, possibly longer if Karen and Jake were being particularly careful. "What's your goal here?" she asked as we were wrapping up. "Divorce proceedings? Public humiliation? Professional consequences?" "All of the above. That's going to require a comprehensive approach, and it's going to cost you." I wrote her a check for $5,000, half my emergency fund. It was worth every penny. That afternoon, I met with Brian Torres at his company's downtown offices. Brian and I had worked together 3 years ago before he'd moved to a competing firm. He was smart, ambitious, and had always resented Karen's rapid rise in the industry. "Mark, Jesus, I heard what happened. That's brutal, man." Yeah, well, time to move on. I might be able to help with that. We're expanding our client services division and we could use someone with your experience. The offices were sleek and modern, everything Karen's company aspired to be. Floor-to-ceiling windows, open-plan workspace, the kind of dynamic energy that came from a company on the rise. What kind of timeline are we talking about? I asked. We could have you started within 2 weeks, the salary's competitive, and you'd be working with some of our biggest accounts right away. Including any accounts that might have previously worked with my old firm? Brian grinned. Well, client relationships are built on trust and personal connections, aren't they? If clients want to follow you to a new firm, that's just good business. It was exactly what I'd hoped to hear. Karen had given my job to Jake, but she couldn't give him my relationships with clients. And in the marketing world, relationships were everything. I'm very interested, I said. Great. I'll have HR draw up an offer letter. As I was leaving, Brian walked me to the elevator. You know, Mark, I've always thought your old firm was resting on its laurels. Sometimes a little competition is exactly what the market needs. I spent the rest of the week playing the role of the defeated husband perfectly. I updated my resume, reached out to contacts, had lunch with other friends who offered sympathy and vague promises of networking opportunities. To anyone watching, I was doing exactly what a recently fired marketing executive should be doing. But in the evenings, while Karen worked late with Jake, I was building my case. The joint credit card statements revealed a pattern of expensive dinners, hotel charges, and purchases at high-end lingerie stores that Karen had never worn anything from at home. Our phone records showed hundreds of texts between Karen and Jake, often late at night and early in the morning. Most damning of all were the charges for a weekend conference in Chicago that Karen had attended alone, except the hotel bill showed 2 guests, and Jake had called in sick that same weekend with a convenient case of food poisoning. I photographed everything, built spreadsheets, created a timeline that painted a clear picture of their affair. Sarah had been right about patience. The evidence was there if you knew where to look and were willing to dig for it. On Friday night, Karen came home in an unusually good mood. She'd bought expensive wine and suggested we order takeout from our favorite Thai place. I thought we should celebrate, she said, pouring 2 glasses of Pinot Noir that probably cost more than most people spent on groceries. Celebrate what? Your fresh start, new opportunities, the chance to really spread your wings. She was practically glowing with satisfaction, and I realized what this was about. She thought she'd won. The guilt and awkwardness of the past week had been replaced by the confidence of someone who'd successfully eliminated a problem. That's very thoughtful of you, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings, she said. To getting what we deserve. We clinked glasses, and I watched her take a long sip of wine. She had no idea that in less than a week, I'd be starting at Brian's firm with a salary that was actually higher than what I'd been making at her company. She had no idea that Sarah Mitchell was documenting every move she and Jake made. She had no idea that I'd spent the past week systematically copying every piece of evidence I'd need to destroy both their professional and personal lives. You know what I love about you, Mark? She said, settling onto the couch beside me. You're so resilient. Most men would be bitter about a situation like this, but you're handling it with such grace. What's the point of being bitter? You did what you thought was best for the company. Exactly. And Jake really is the right person for the job. He has vision, energy, fresh ideas. He certainly made an impression quickly. He did. Sometimes you meet someone and you just know they're going to be important in your life. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was talking about falling in love with another man like it was a business decision, something that had just happened naturally and inevitably. Well, I said carefully, I hope he lives up to your expectations. Oh, he will. Jake's very dedicated to success. We spent the evening watching a movie, sharing wine and Thai food like we had hundreds of times before. To anyone watching, we looked like a normal married couple having a quiet night at home. but I could feel the distance between us, the careful way she was managing the conversation to avoid any topic that might lead to uncomfortable questions. When she went to bed, claiming exhaustion from another long week, I sat in my home office and reviewed everything I'd learned. The affair was documented, the professional conspiracy was clear, and I had allies in place for the next phase of my plan. Sarah called me Saturday morning with an update. "I've got photos," she said without preamble. "Hotel entrance, restaurant, his apartment building. They're not being particularly careful." "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. They're definitely sleeping together, and they're definitely using company resources to facilitate it. I've got receipts for hotel rooms charged to the corporate account, meals that were supposedly client entertainment, but were clearly romantic dinners. What's next?" "I need another week to build a complete picture. But Mark, you need to think carefully about how you want to use this information. Once you pull the trigger, there's no going back." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because I've seen people destroy their own lives in pursuit of revenge. Make sure you're prepared for the consequences." After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about consequences. Karen and Jake had already destroyed my life. I was just returning the favor. The question was how far I was willing to go and how much collateral damage I was willing to accept. My phone buzzed with a text from Dave. "Golf tomorrow?" "Tom's in." I hesitated before responding. Golf meant 3 hours of conversation, and I wasn't sure I could maintain my facade that long. But I also needed to keep my relationships intact for what came next. "Sure. Usual time?" 10 a.m. See you there." Sunday morning golf was a ritual that had survived marriages, job changes, and various personal crises. The three of us had been playing together for years, and I knew Dave and Tom well enough to read their moods and motivations. Dave was distracted, checking his phone frequently and making uncharacteristic mistakes on easy shots. Tom was overcompensating with jokes and commentary, the way he always did when he was uncomfortable about something. "Everything okay?" I asked Dave as we walked to the 7th tee. "Yeah, just work stuff. Big case coming up." "Anything interesting?" He glanced at Tom, and I caught the look that passed between them. They knew something, and they were debating whether to tell me. "Actually," Tom said, "we heard something you should probably know about." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice casual. "What's that?" "There's talk around town about Karen and Jake," Dave said carefully. "People are starting to notice that they're spending a lot of time together. They work together, that's normal." "Mark," Tom said gently, "they were seen at Romano's last weekend. Very cozy, very couple-like." I pretended to consider this information, letting surprise and hurt play across my face. "Are you sure?" Dave's secretary was there with her husband. She said there was no mistaking what she saw. "Shit." I sat down heavily on a bench beside the tee box. I knew things had been weird between us lately, but I thought it was just the stress of the job situation. Dave sat beside me. "I'm sorry, man. We debated whether to tell you, but we figured you had a right to know." "How long do you think it's been going on?" "Hard to say. But if people are starting to notice, it's probably been happening for a while." I let them comfort me, accepting their sympathy and advice about lawyers and private investigators. They were good friends, genuinely concerned about my welfare. But I could also see the calculation behind their concern. They were already thinking about how this would affect their own relationships with Karen's company, their own positions in our social circle. "What are you going to do?" Tom asked. "I don't know. Confront her, I guess. See if she'll admit it." "You might want to get some evidence first," Dave suggested. "If this ends up in divorce court, you'll want documentation." "That's good advice. Do you know any private investigators?" "I can give you a couple of names." We finished the round in subdued conversation, my friends offering support while carefully avoiding any commitments that might compromise their own interests. It was exactly what I'd expected, and it told me everything I needed to know about who I could count on when things got messy. That evening, Karen came home with flowers and another bottle of expensive wine. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "Do I need an occasion to bring my husband flowers?" But there was something forced about her cheerfulness, a brittle quality that suggested she was overcompensating for something. Maybe she'd heard the same rumors that had reached Dave and Tom. Maybe she was starting to worry that their careful facade was cracking. "They're beautiful," I said, arranging the roses in a vase. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together. We haven't been spending enough time lately." "That sounds great." She cooked, actually cooked, not just ordered takeout. And we had dinner by candlelight like we were celebrating an anniversary. She asked about my job search, offered to make some calls on my behalf, suggested we take a vacation once I got settled in a new position. It was a masterful performance, the kind of evening that would make any reasonable husband question his suspicions about his wife's fidelity. If I hadn't already seen the evidence, hadn't already documented the affair, I might have been fooled. "I love you, Mark," she said as we were cleaning up. "I know this has been a difficult time, but I want you to know that whatever happens with work, we're solid, you and me." "I love you too," I said, and for a moment, I almost meant it. But then I remembered Jake's hand on her back at the hotel, remembered the credit card charges and phone records and weekend conference in Chicago. This wasn't love, it was damage control. "Karen," I said carefully, "is there anything you want to tell me? Anything about work or Jake or anything else?" For just a moment her mask slipped. I saw fear flash across her face, quickly replaced by confusion and concern. "What do you mean?" "I've been hearing things, rumors, about you and Jake spending a lot of time together." "We work together, Mark. Of course we spend time together." "I mean outside of work." She set down the dish she was drying and turned to face me fully. "What exactly are you asking me?" "I'm asking if there's something going on between you and Jake that I should know about." "Mark, that's ridiculous. Jake is my employee. Yes, we've had some business dinners, some strategy sessions, but anything beyond that is just office gossip." "So you're saying there's nothing romantic between you?" "I'm saying I can't believe you're even asking me that question." She was good. I had to give her that. The perfect mixture of hurt and indignation, just enough offense to make me feel guilty for asking, while not quite denying the accusation outright. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's just been a weird time, and people are talking, and I needed to hear it from you." "People will always talk, Mark. That's what people do. But I would never, ever betray our marriage like that." She kissed me then, soft and lingering. And for a moment I wondered if I'd gotten it all wrong. Maybe the evidence was circumstantial. Maybe I was seeing patterns that didn't exist. Maybe my hurt and anger were making me paranoid. Then her phone buzzed with a text message, and I saw Jake's name on the screen before she quickly turned it face down. "Work?" I asked. "Probably. I'll check it later." But I'd seen enough of the message preview to know it wasn't about work. Can't wait for tomorrow night. The performance was over. Karen went upstairs to take a bath, claiming she needed to relax after such an emotional conversation. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the roses she'd brought home, understanding finally that they weren't a gesture of love. They were a bribe, a way of assuaging her guilt while she continued her affair. I checked my phone and found a message from Sarah. "Package ready for delivery. When do you want to meet?" I typed back, "Tomorrow morning. It's time." The evidence was compiled, the new job was secured, and I had a clear picture of exactly who I was dealing with. Karen thought she was managing the situation, controlling the narrative, keeping me docile while she and Jake built their new life together. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Sarah's evidence package was thorough, professional, and devastating. We met at the same coffee shop, but this time she brought a thick folder and a laptop loaded with digital files. 67 photographs, she said, opening the folder. 12 different locations spanning 3 weeks. Hotel entrances, restaurant meetings, his apartment building, her car parked overnight at his place. The photos told the story better than any written report could have. Karen and Jake, holding hands, walking into Romano's. Karen leaving Jake's apartment building at 6 a.m., wearing the same dress she'd worn to work late the night before. Jake's hand on her lower back as they entered the Riverside Hotel. The financial evidence is even more damning, Sarah continued, opening her laptop. Company credit card charges for hotel rooms, meals, even a weekend spa package that was supposedly a client entertainment expense. How much are we talking about? Roughly $15,000 in the past 4 months, all charged to the company, all for personal use. That's embezzlement. Technically, yes, though proving intent might be tricky if they claim it was legitimate business entertainment. What about the personal stuff? Sarah clicked through to another folder. Phone records show an average of 43 text messages per day between them, starting about 6 months ago. The timing correlates with when Jake started at the company. 6 months. They'd been planning this from the beginning. Jake hadn't just taken my job. He'd been recruited specifically to replace me, both professionally and personally. There's one more thing, Sarah said, her expression grim. I did some background checking on Jake Turner. His employment history is interesting. She pulled up another file. 3 previous jobs in 5 years. Each time, he left under circumstances involving relationships with married supervisors. He's done this before. It's his pattern. Find a successful woman in a position of power, seduce her, use her to advance his career, then move on to the next opportunity. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Karen wasn't just cheating on me. She was being played by a professional con artist who specialized in destroying marriages for career advancement. Does she know? I doubt it. Women like your wife, smart, successful, used to being in control, they're actually the easiest targets for guys like Jake. They think they're too sophisticated to be fooled. I stared at the photographs, seeing my wife's face glowing with happiness as she held hands with a man who'd probably already started planning his exit strategy. What do you recommend? That depends on what you want to accomplish. If it's just about the divorce, you have more than enough evidence. If you want to destroy them professionally, you'll need to be more strategic. I want both. Sarah nodded. Then we need to think about timing and sequence. Hit them when they're most vulnerable, when they can't cover their tracks or manage the narrative. I spent the rest of the morning studying the evidence, memorizing every detail, planning my approach. By the time I got home, I had a clear strategy. Karen was in her home office, door closed, voice raised in what sounded like an intense phone conversation. I could hear fragments through the door. Absolutely not. Board meeting, damage control. Something was happening at work, something that had her stressed and defensive. Perfect timing. I knocked on the door. Karen, everything okay? Just a minute, she called. Then I heard her say into the phone, "We'll discuss this later." She opened the door, her face flushed with anger and frustration. "Sorry, work crisis. What's up?" "I wanted to tell you some good news. I got a job offer." Her expression shifted from irritation to surprise to something that might have been concern. "That's great, Mark. Where?" "Brian Torres's firm. Better salary, better benefits, and I start Monday." "Brian Torres." She repeated the name like it tasted bad. "They're our biggest competitor." "I know." We stared at each other, the implications hanging in the air between us. I was joining the enemy, and we both knew it meant I'd be taking clients with me. "Mark, I hope you're not planning to do anything vindictive." "Like what?" "Like using confidential information or client relationships to hurt the company." "You mean the company that fired me? The company that gave my job to your boyfriend?" The word hung between us like a live wire. Karen's face went white, then red, then settled into a mask of cold fury. "What did you just say?" "I said the company that gave my job to your boyfriend, Jake, your lover, your partner in embezzlement and adultery." "Mark, you're being ridiculous." I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Sarah's photographs. Karen and Jake kissing in the parking lot of Romano's restaurant. Am I? She stared at the photo, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Where did you get this? Does it matter? The question is, how long did you think you could lie to me? Mark, I can explain. Explain what? The affair? The embezzlement? The months of planning to destroy my career so you could play house with your new toy? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Karen? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you systematically destroyed our marriage and my career so you could fuck your employee. She flinched at the crude language, but recovered quickly. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, the responsibilities. Save it. I pulled out Sarah's folder and dropped it on her desk. I have photographs, financial records, phone logs, hotel receipts. I know about Chicago. I know about the company credit card charges. I know about every lie you've told me for the past 6 months. She opened the folder with trembling hands, her face growing paler with each photograph. Mark, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. What do you want? I want you out of my house by the end of the week. I want a divorce, and I want you to understand that your little love affair is about to become very public knowledge. You can't do this. Watch me. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Karen? You might want to ask Jake about his employment history, specifically about the other married supervisors he's seduced and destroyed. You're not his first, and you won't be his last. I left her sitting at her desk, staring at the evidence of her betrayal, finally understanding that her carefully constructed plan had just collapsed around her. My phone was ringing before I reached the kitchen. Jake, probably getting an emergency call from Karen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Mark, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. We need to talk. No, we didn't. The next call was from Dave. Mark, what the hell is going on? Karen just called me, crying, saying something about divorce papers and private investigators. Karen and Jake have been having an affair. I have proof. I'm filing for divorce and starting a new job on Monday. Jesus Christ. Are you okay? I'm better than I've been in months. Do you need a lawyer? I need a good lawyer. The best you know. I'll make some calls. Tom called 20 minutes later with the same questions and the same offer of help. Word was spreading fast, which was exactly what I wanted. By tomorrow, everyone in our social circle would know about the affair. By next week, it would be common knowledge throughout the industry. Karen emerged from her office an hour later, her eyes red from crying, her carefully composed facade finally cracked. Mark, please. We need to talk about this rationally. There's nothing rational about adultery and embezzlement. I never meant for this to happen. It just evolved. Evolved. I tested the word. Is that what you call systematically destroying our marriage? I love him. The simple statement hit harder than I'd expected, not because it hurt, that pain was already absorbed and processed, but because of its casual cruelty. Did you ever love me? She was quiet for a long moment. Yes, but that was a long time ago. How long has it been going on? 6 months, since Jake started at the company. And the plan to fire me? That wasn't about Jake. That was about business. Bullshit. Mark, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. You fell in love with someone else and decided I was inconvenient, so you eliminated the inconvenience. It wasn't that calculated. Wasn't it? The emails, the meetings, the careful planning? Sarah's investigator found evidence going back months, Karen. You didn't just fall into this. You orchestrated it. She sat down heavily on the couch, looking older than her 39 years. What do you want from me? I want you to move out. I want a divorce. And I want you to face the consequences of your choices. What consequences? I smiled, and she must have seen something in my expression that frightened her because she actually recoiled. You'll find out. That evening, while Karen packed her things upstairs, I called Brian to confirm my start date and discuss client transition strategies. Then I called Sarah to authorize the next phase of her investigation. I want you to document everything, I told her. Every company policy they violated, every ethical boundary they crossed, every piece of evidence that could be used in a professional misconduct hearing. That's going to require expanding the investigation. Do it. Mark, are you sure about this? Once you go nuclear, there's no walking it back. I'm sure. Karen left that night, taking 2 suitcases and promising to come back for the rest of her things later. She tried one more time to convince me to handle the situation quietly, privately, without involving lawyers or public embarrassment. Think about your reputation, she said. Think about how this will look. I am thinking about it. I'm thinking that everyone should know exactly who you really are. After she left, I sat in our empty house, surrounded by the detritus of our marriage, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The uncertainty was over. The lies were exposed, and I was finally free to fight back. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. This doesn't have to get ugly. Let's meet and work something out. I typed back, it's already ugly, and it's going to get much worse. Tomorrow I would start my new job, begin poaching clients from my old firm, and launch a systematic campaign to destroy the people who'd destroyed me. Karen and Jake thought they'd won, thought they'd successfully eliminated me from their perfect new life. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Monday morning at Brian's firm felt like stepping into a parallel universe where I was valued, respected, and wanted. The office buzzed with energy, and my new colleagues welcomed me with genuine enthusiasm. Mark, perfect timing, Brian said, leading me to a conference room where 3 people were waiting. I want you to meet the Morrison account team. Morrison, my former client, one of Karen's biggest accounts. The irony was delicious. Mark Evans, said Janet Morrison, standing to shake my hand. We were so hoping you'd be handling our account here. I thought you were happy with your current agency. We were happy with you? When we heard about the changes at your old firm, we started looking for alternatives. Over the next hour, I learned that Morrison wasn't the only client reconsidering their relationship with Karen's company. Word of the management shakeup had spread quickly through the industry, and clients were nervous about continuity and service quality. We've had 3 other companies reach out this week, Brian told me as we walked to my new office, all asking specifically for you. My new office had a window, a view of the city, and most importantly, a door I could close. I spent the morning setting up my workspace and reviewing client files, but my mind was on the larger campaign I was planning. At lunch, I met with Sarah at a restaurant across town. I've expanded the investigation like you requested, she said, sliding another folder across the table. The financial irregularities go deeper than we thought. How deep? Jake's been using company resources for personal expenses since his 2nd week on the job. Hotel rooms, meals, travel, even clothing purchases. We're looking at close to $30,000 in questionable charges. And Karen? She's been approving all of it. Either she's incredibly naive or she's been complicit from the beginning. What about the professional misconduct angle? That's where it gets interesting. Jake's previous employers are very willing to talk, off the record. Apparently, he left quite a trail of destruction. Sarah opened her laptop and showed me a timeline she'd constructed. 3 companies, 3 married female supervisors, 3 patterns of seduction, advancement, and abandonment. His last victim was a VP at a consulting firm in Denver. She divorced her husband, promoted Jake to partner, then discovered he was already working on his next target. By the time she figured out what was happening, he'd stolen 2 major clients and moved to a competitor. What happened to her? Fired, divorced, professionally ruined. She's working as a freelance consultant now, trying to rebuild her reputation. Jesus. Jake Turner is a predator, Mark, and Karen is just his latest victim. The question is, do you want to save her or destroy her? I thought about it for a long moment. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Then we proceed as planned, full speed ahead. That afternoon, I started making calls. Client relationships in the marketing world were built on trust and personal connections, and I'd spent 8 years building those connections. Now, it was time to leverage them. "Mark, I heard about the situation," said David Chen, CEO of a mid-sized tech company that had been with Karen's firm for 3 years. "We've been wondering about the stability of our account management." "I understand your concerns, David. Change can be unsettling, especially when it involves losing someone we trust. Would you be interested in discussing a potential transition?" By the end of the week, I'd had similar conversations with 6 former clients. 3 were ready to make the move immediately. 2 wanted to wait until their current contracts expired, and 1 was still deciding. It represented nearly $2 million in annual billings, enough to seriously damage Karen's company and establish me as a major player at Brian's firm. "This is unprecedented," Brian said when I updated him on Friday afternoon. "I've never seen client defection on this scale. People value relationships over corporate loyalty. Karen's going to be furious. Karen's going to be unemployed if this continues." That evening, I was having dinner at Murphy's when Dave and Tom joined me at the bar. They looked uncomfortable, like men bearing bad news. "We need to talk," Dave said without preamble. "About what?" "About Karen and Jake and the nuclear war you're apparently waging against them." I took a sip of my beer. "I'm not waging anything. I'm just doing business." "Bullshit," Tom said. "You're systematically destroying them, and everyone knows it. They destroyed me first. That doesn't make this right." I looked at my 2 oldest friends, seeing the judgment in their eyes, and realized our relationship had fundamentally changed. They weren't here as allies. They were here as mediators, trying to minimize the damage to their own interests. "Are you here as my friends or as Karen's lawyers?" "We're here as people who care about all of you," Dave said carefully. "This situation is getting out of hand." "What situation?" "The affair, the embezzlement, the systematic destruction of my career and marriage." "The public humiliation," Tom said. "The client poaching, the professional sabotage." "I'm not sabotaging anyone. I'm competing. You're using inside information and personal relationships to damage your former company." "I'm using my professional network and industry knowledge to build my new career. If that damages Karen's company, that's an unfortunate side effect." Dave leaned forward. "Mark, we get it. You're angry. You have every right to be angry. But this scorched earth approach is going to hurt you more than it hurts them." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, I'm thriving while they're scrambling to explain to their board why they're losing major clients." "It's going to backfire," Tom insisted. "People will start seeing you as vindictive, unstable. It'll hurt your reputation." "My reputation was already destroyed when my wife fired me to make room for her boyfriend." We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Finally, Dave spoke up. "What do you want, Mark? What's the end game here?" "I want them to face the consequences of their actions. I want Karen to understand what it feels like to lose everything she's worked for. I want Jake to be exposed as the predator he is, and I want everyone in this industry to know that there are costs to betraying people." "And then what?" "Then I move on with my life." Dave and Tom exchanged glances. "We can't support this," Dave said finally. "I'm not asking you to. We're asking you to stop. And I'm declining your request." Tom shook his head. "This isn't the Mark we know. The Mark you knew was naive enough to trust his wife and generous enough to share his success with people who were plotting against him. That Mark is gone." They left shortly after, and I knew our friendship was probably over. It was a price I was willing to pay. Saturday morning, Sarah called with an update that changed everything. "I found something," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "Jake's been embezzling money, not just misusing company resources, real embezzlement, to the tune of about $100,000. How? Fake vendor accounts, inflated expense reports, kickbacks from suppliers. He's been skimming money since his second month on the job. Does Karen know? Some of it requires her approval, so either she knows and she's complicit, or she's been signing off on things without reviewing them. Which is it? Based on the documentation, I think she knows. There are emails discussing creative accounting and maximizing available resources. She's in this up to her neck. This was bigger than an affair, bigger than workplace misconduct. This was criminal fraud, and it gave me leverage I hadn't expected. What do you recommend? We take this to the authorities, FBI, IRS, whoever handles corporate fraud. This isn't just about your divorce anymore. This is about serious criminal activity. I thought about it for a long moment. Involving federal authorities would destroy Karen and Jake completely, but it would also make the situation public in ways I couldn't control. Let me think about it. Don't think too long. If they realize what we've found, they'll start covering their tracks. That afternoon, I sat in my home office, staring at the evidence of Karen and Jake's crimes, trying to decide how far I was willing to go. They'd destroyed my life systematically, methodically, without a trace of remorse. They'd stolen from their company, lied to clients, and betrayed every principle of professional conduct. But involving federal authorities felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. My phone rang. Karen. "Mark, we need to talk." "I don't think we do. Please, it's important." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. She looked terrible, exhausted, stressed, older than her years. The confident, successful woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who looked like she was barely holding herself together. "The board is asking questions," she said without preamble. "About what?" "About the client defections, about Jake's expenses, about us." "What kind of questions?" "They want a full audit of the department. They want explanations for why we're losing major accounts. They want to know if there's any truth to the rumors about Jake and me." I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. "Mark, I know you hate me. I know you want to hurt me. But please don't destroy the company. There are innocent people who depend on those jobs. You should have thought about that before you started your affair. I made a mistake. I know that now. But Jake, he's not who I thought he was." "What do you mean?" "I found out about his history, about the other women, the other companies. You were right. I was just another Mark." "Where is he now?" "Gone. He cleaned out his office Friday night and disappeared, left me to face the board alone." So Jake had followed his pattern: seduce, exploit, abandon. Karen was learning what his previous victims had learned, but it was too late to matter. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "But this isn't my problem anymore." "It could be. If the company goes under, if there's a criminal investigation, it could affect your divorce settlement." She was right, of course. If Karen lost everything, there would be nothing left to divide. "What are you asking me to do?" "Help me contain the damage. Stop the client defections. Give me a chance to salvage something from this mess." I looked at the woman I'd once loved, seeing desperation and genuine remorse in her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "No," I said finally. "You made your choices, Karen. Now you get to live with them." I left her sitting in the coffee shop, staring into her cup like it might contain answers to questions she was afraid to ask. That evening I called Sarah. "I've made my decision," I said. "Take it to the authorities, all of it." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. This is going to get very ugly, very quickly." "Good. It's time for the truth to come out." Monday morning, I was in my office when Brian knocked on my door. "Turn on the news," he said, his face grim. The local business channel was running a breaking story. Federal agents raid marketing firm and fraud investigation. The camera showed FBI agents carrying boxes out of Karen's building, while reporters speculated about the scope of the investigation. My phone was ringing constantly. Reporters, former colleagues, clients wanting to know if their accounts were affected. I referred all calls to Brian and focused on my work, knowing that the next few weeks would determine whether my campaign for justice had been worth the cost. By noon, the story had spread to the national business press. Karen's company stock was in free fall, and there were rumors that the board was considering bankruptcy. I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just a hollow understanding that sometimes justice looked a lot like mutual destruction, but it was too late to turn back now. The wheels were in motion, and all I could do was wait to see who would be left standing when the dust settled.